hosted by Suzi, featuring Muna, Angelica, and Charlie. Oh, yeah. Skip it up, boot out.
Okay, I am officially cracking up at that. That's the first time I've seen the Poetry Roundtable intro. So I hope everyone's appreciating that as much as I am. I am Suzi F. Garcia. You all know me, but just a little something. I'm the author of the chapbook Dear Dorothy, a homegrown fairy tale available for pre-order now from Bone Bouquet. I have an MFA in creative writing with minors in screen cultures and gender studies. I'm an executive editor at Noemi Press, and I'm a Cantamundo Fellow, a Macondonista, and participated in the first ever poetry incubator at the Poetry Foundation. I currently serve as the Cantamundo Regional Chair for the Midwest. My writing has been featured in or is forthcoming from Poetry Magazine, The Offing Vinyl, Fence Magazine, and more. And I'm one of the 4 members of Podquester. Thank you all for joining us today. We have some amazing poets with us. First up is Muna. Muna, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yes. So my name is Muna Abdullahi. I am a spoken word poet based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was ranked the 8th spoken word poet in the world based off of the Women of the World Poetry Slam competition in 2018, as well as a 3-time Minnesota Grand Slam champion. In my work, I typically explore around themes of belonging, identity, particularly in the context of migration and nationality. As a writer and poet, I typically push around the sense of telling stories that are raised, silenced, devalued, or buried, the stories that are difficult, that bring together communities, youth, and discussions.
Great. Thank you, Mona. And now we have Angelica.
What's the follow? Hi, I am Angelica. I'm your typical underachiever when it comes to my writing. I am not published. I performed a lot throughout college and after college in New York City. But since then, I've really been working on my work on the page, and against a lot of my teachers' suggestions, have never submitted a damn thing.
Good. There's
we can talk about why a little bit more later.
We'll have a whole conversation. Y'all are all bringing up like things that I want to talk about in future poetry roundtables too. And then last but certainly not least is Charlie.
Hi everybody, I'm Charlie. I would say I'm more getting into poetry, but it's something I really like to do in my free time, and I'm trying to, get into it more seriously because I had a lot of professors in college who told me it was something I should pursue. So,
all right. Now, Charlie, you have a minor in creative writing, right?
I have a minor in creative writing. Yeah, I majored in politics and cinema studies, but I wound up getting the creative writing minor right at the end, and yeah, in this last year, I've gotten really into writing. When before that, I would say I'm more of a reader. I don't know. Thanks, Daniel.
I asked people, I was like, I'm eager for people to weigh in on Charlie's blonde hair. So thank you all for respecting my request. No, so I just wanted to, we talked about having several different iterations of the Poetry Roundtable. And we'll kind of see what we want to do and what people want to do. But for tonight, I kind of wanted to talk about why we got into poetry and what we kind of expect from poetry and hope for from poetry, etc. Angelica, I always want to call you Angelica because I don't know why I'm going to Latin that X your name. You were mentioning that you started out by performing and moved to the page. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was in college, I found performance poetry, and I think in a lot of ways it really it saved my life in a way. It opened me up to things that I found right bloody at the time, and it'd be 2007 when it was, they were doing the most. And I kind of fell in love with all of those poets. I tried to emulate them. I was really into slam. And I ended up going into a creative writing minor. I was a classics major in college. So I studied Latin and ancient Greek. Took up a lot of my time. But I did pursue a creative writing minor. And in all those classes that I took in college, I was always criticized for my long form, for my work not working on the page. And then I had a real complex about it. So I spent all the years after focused on that more than anything. So now I do believe that good poetry should work both ways. It shouldn't matter. But it's taken me a long time to get there.
Yeah. What are the two ways? Are you saying on the page and out loud?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I shouldn't have to read it to you. And I was like that for a long time. I wouldn't let anyone read it off the page. Mm-hmm. And I think that I've worked a lot harder on making my work speak for itself.
Okay. And Mona, you also come from a performance background. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. My story is kind of long, but I'm going to tell it and try to synthesize it as much as possible. But basically, I come from a family, so I'm first generation Somali American. And my parents were refugees from Somalia. And Somalia, if y'all don't know, is known as the nation of poets. It's called Gabe. It's a form in my country, in my motherland, where poets were seen as the most highly thing you could ever have. So if you had a poet in your events, like you were big shits, you were the deal. And so poets were something that were very well known in this country of Somalia. And for me, generationally, my grandmother was a poet and my great grandmother was a poet. And so for me, being born and raised in America, I was just very disconnected from my Somali culture. I was just very much so centered around trying to fit in, trying to just be like everybody else. I grew up in a predominantly white town my whole education was predominantly white. And so for me, I was just all about not talking, or was quote unquote embarrassed of my Somali culture. And so it wasn't until growing up, when in middle school, high school, middle school was when I started to write. But I didn't perform, I didn't show anybody my work, I didn't do any of that. But it wasn't until I started to reconnect with my grandmother and my culture when I started to really own my work and my poetry. Part of my life nobody really knows is during post 9/11, there was a fire that occurred at the mosque, one of the mosques I was at. And luckily everybody was safe, but I also became mute, meaning that I didn't speak for a long time in my life. And so the reason I got into performative poetry was in high school, when I started to really want to start to speak again. Speaking poetry was really what allowed me to really learn how to speak. And it wasn't, so if you can hear how I speak kind of in a rhythm. And that's through how I learned, through doing poetry and doing other people's poetry. And so I joined speech in high school, and during speech was just, I don't know if a lot of people know, because I think it's like a Minnesota thing. I don't know if other states do it, but it's like a very competitive thing where you join poetry, or you join prose, or you do drama, whatever, and you do speeches and you get ranked and you go nationals or whatever. And so for me, I was in the category of poetry, and I took that so seriously, and I just fell in love with performative poetry. And so it wasn't until college when I started to do my own work and started to perform and started to get out there. But yeah, I'm just performative poetry just has a very special place in my heart, and in a way that I think, I don't know if I can ever get to the page, because it's something that is a big part of my story and a big part of why I do poetry. And so, yeah.
Well, I think that's a really special story. That's amazing that poetry was able to help you kind of, I don't want to use the phrase find your voice, but like to think about your voice.
Yeah.
It's so literal. Charlie, what brought you to poetry?
Both my parents are writers, and so I grew up kind of like having like a complex of like, oh, like that's what my parents do, like I'm not going to do that. And so I kind of tried to find something else, like I want to be good at history, I want to be good at science, I want to be good at whatever. And I've always found like political science like really easy, it comes really easily to me. that kind of stuff, history. And I went to college, and I like in the first like 2 years, I knocked out my major, like my politics major. I just had like the project list, so I just had like 2 years of credits to fill. I was like, what am I going to do with these? So I started taking film classes, and in one of my film classes, it was like half film, half English, and we read a lot of poetry in that class. And a lot of it, I had already been reading poetry for fun, but a lot of that poetry like made me realize like, oh wow, like look at all the things you can do with this form and like this format. And I think like something that I love about movies is like, oh, you can say something that you could never say with prose, like you can never say with words, you can look at on the screen. And I kind of feel the same way about poetry. Like I feel like I can depict like a moment, or I can read about like a feeling, and it enters my brain in a way that like computes to me personally, like in my kind of like psyche and like in my heart, like in a way that like someone writing about why those things happen and like a story about it like honestly never could. So like that was very like inspirational to me. And then I started to experiment with it, and it's something I really enjoy doing because I find it personally fulfilling to like see it go from like a nugget of like something I want to write about, and then like find that goal like really achievable. And I've spent like, even in my short amount of time writing poetry, like months on a poem, and it's like, wow, this started as 8 lines and it ended as 10 lines, but every iteration that this went through was like a journey that I feel like connected to with this. And like, so I don't know, I feel like a lot of it is like for me, like it feels like an important part of like my development as a person. So I don't know, you know?
Agreed.
That's really cool. So it was a way for not you just to express yourself, but explore yourself.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't love the way I put that. But you understood what I mean. Well, thank y'all for sharing your stories. I'm really excited that we're all coming from like such different areas when it comes to poetry and stuff. Did y'all want to talk maybe a little bit about some of your favorite poets and like some poets that inspire you?
Where to start?
You've been working with a lot of poets lately, haven't you, Angelica?
I have. Before I found Podquester, actually, I dove deep into workshops during quarantine. I worked with John Sands, Adam Faulkner, Buddy Wakefield, Megan Fowley. I did one with Derek Brown and East Mojgani were all on the Buddy Wakefield workshop that I was in. So a lot of the performance poets that I loved when I was younger, I kind of found my way back to this past year. And that was really, really, really fulfilling for me, especially coming from a place where that was like looked down upon when I was in school. I went back when I was working with John Sands a few months ago, and I found his small self-published chapbook that I bought from him maybe 10 years ago in New York at a show he did. And in the inscription in the front, when he signed it to me, it said, "Angelica, you in this journey, I can't wait to holler and scream from the sidelines." And I forgot about it, and I found it, 10 years later, and it was just, it felt really full circle. Like I drove 13 hours once in the middle of the night because they canceled a show in New York, and I drove to South Carolina to see them as soon as I found out that show was canceled, and to see Buddy Wakefield and Derek Brown and East Mojgani. And when I did that workshop with them like a month ago, Buddy hates reading poetry. He does not read it off the page. He won't. So he made me submit a video submission of me reading a poem to him. And when it came time to critique it, he went, "You're good and you know you're good. Stop talking." Because I was trying to apologize for things. And that really just gave me a confidence that I haven't had in the past couple of years. So I've been reinvigorated lately. But that's really complicated because I feel ready to submit. This is like a whole subject I'd like to bring up on this spot, but like we can get into this. I don't know if that's what the world needs right now. Is, for me to be submitting. I feel like I need to take a step back. I don't know. I've kind of walked away from it, and I don't know how to get back to it.
I guess I just don't understand. I don't know if you.
No, I get it. I just feel like my point of view, what I'm writing about, my life experience, like I don't want to be I do want to be putting it out there. I just don't want to feel, I felt selfish to be submitting it right. I don't know. That's it. And I feel like it might be an excuse to have walked away from it, but that's why I walked away from it.
Like, I think part of that is there's like the scarcity myth that there's only room for like a certain amount of people.
I know that it's an insecurity, but I know it's something I need to work through right now, and I'm in the middle of it. Does that make sense?
Okay. Well, as long as you're working on it. I only use my bullying powers for good. So I will bully you into submitting if you need me to. But if you're working on it,
Megan's been pushing me pretty hard, which is really nice. I like the bullying work.
Okay, good. And you worked with Rachel McEvans recently, right?
Not recently, a long time ago. I had a workshop with Rachel. I used to work with Shira Ehrlichman a lot. And I took in class workshops with Angel Nafis when I was in Brooklyn. That kind of led me into, like, you know, one person leads to another, and they're all intertwined, and they're all wonderful poets. Shira's new book is the one that I wanted to bring up later because it is so important to me right now.
Yeah. I am obsessed with Angel Nafis's work. Also, Rachel McEvans as a poet and a person. So.
I went to the Greenlight bookstore in Brooklyn about once a week when I lived there, and Angel worked there, and that's how I got to know her.
Okay. Yeah, she is amazing. I actually sent Audrey a poem from her.
Wow.
Yeah, because that is like what I do with people. I'm like, hi, I know that I know you. I know something about you, and I'm going to send you either a poem or a book.
I get it.
Yeah, I'm a frustrating person to be friends with.
A love language of mine is like sending people like either playlists, poems, books. Like that's first of all, people like one of my pet peeves though is I give books to people and I always forget that I giving them books to people, and then like it's 2 years later I'm like, hey, by the way, do you still have that book?
Yeah. No, I just buy them their own copy. I don't let people borrow my books anymore. It's gotten to that extent.
I lost a copy of my favorite book of poetry, and I don't remember who I gave it to. And ever since then, I won't lend anything out because it had an inscription in the front. It was Jean Ann Verlee, and I will never forgive myself for that. So.
Yeah, that would be upsetting. No, I'm just a naturally selfish person, so I've always been a buyer for somebody instead of a loaner. I'm just like, no, these are my books. Please don't touch my books. I know I've shared some pictures with some people of my office right now since the flood, but yeah, I have too many books to be this possessive of books, but that's just the way it is. Like, I was trying to find a book today and I found 3 copies of it. And I was like, that's probably not the way it should go. But oh well. I'm okay with it. I love the book, apparently. Charlie, who are some poets that you admire?
So I need to shout out Frank Stanford, but he's kind of a problematic fave because yeah, he's definitely a problematic fave, but I have to shout him out because that was like the first book of poetry I read. And so like, I don't know, he's definitely aged really poorly, but I do have to say like that was like the first book like I was like, I've read this and like I really like this format. And then I also have to shout out like for my like reinvigoration, I have this book here. This was the book that I read for that class I was talking about, which is Whereas by Layli Long Soldier.
Layli Long Soldier, yeah.
I really love this book. Like, I mean, besides like the book touching on like really important topics and being a really like, I think like important piece of work, I love how experimental it is while also like obviously like being so beautiful. It kind of like plays a lot on this idea of like, well, obviously I'd say thematically it's a lot about, you know, like indigenous genocide, but also it's very much about like how indigenous writers can like claim space on the page. And like, I just think this book is like truly fascinating and like I could read it like a million times over. and like find new things about it, because each poem is like really experimenting with how, there are poems that are like T charts, and some poems that are like more like normal poems, and poems in boxes, and poems that are like map like things, and poems that play off of like primary sources. And I just think like it's a really like fascinating book that made me like, oh wow, like a book of poetry like can do this, like and so
I love
I mean
that.
it's a really amazing book. It's also a fun shape. It's square. But yeah, so I would say like,
Yes.
and there are things about like Frank Stanford style that I like, but that's what got me in. This book reinvigorated it. And I've been reading a lot of like I'm trying to get more into like old like anthologies and magazines that have been put up online for free, just to like try and get like a gauge of what I like. But yeah.
So what magazines have you been reading?
I would say like I've been reading a lot of like the poetry, like it might just be called I think it's like the American
Are you
Poetry.
talking about poetry, or you're talking about
Poetry
American the Academy?
It might
of
be
American Poets?
Yeah, that's the one. And they have like a lot of anthologies, issues, especially from the 90s, that you can just read for free. And
oh wait, are you talking about the Poetry Foundation?
see, I don't know. I can send you a link, but like I think it's just called Poetry Magazine. But anyway,
Yeah.
Poetry
Right
Magazine.
there. Talk about problematic phase.
But I've just been reading through those because I like that they're like dated, and I can be like, oh, this is like I'm going chronologically through time. And I've been enjoying those.
I have to say, I would go reverse chronologically in time for poetry.
Not all the way back. I've been in the 90s right now, but like I'm not starting from like the first issues.
I would start in like 2012, to be honest.
2012.
Poetry
Right.
I'm just saying, talking about problematic phase.
Yeah.
Like they just published me in like March, and I'm still like,
right
when I got my check. But yeah, no, that's exciting. I like that you're exploring, and they do have an amazing website. The Academy of American Poets, that's also got an amazing website for people who are looking, and they also will like do it by theme. They'll help you find different poets. There used to be this site called like Poetry Tips, and it would be like, if you like this poet, you will like this poet. And it was super cute and super cool, but now they don't do it anymore. It makes me sad because I was connected to really cool people on there. And I cared a lot about that. But that was cool. Muna, what about you? Who are some poets that really inspire you?
Yeah, I would have to say like the first person who got me absolutely fall in love with poetry is the love Maya Angelou, and that woman just in herself like changed my life through her poetry. And through that, when I started to get into poetry, I fell in love with a lot of spoken word poets, and specifically in Minneapolis, and that being one Dante Collins, which I have his autopsy book, which is phenomenal. But let's see, old school Nikki Giovanni, the woman is phenomenal. Let's see, Denez Smith, Hugh who else? Morgan Parker. Personally, Sophia Alhio. And personally, like, I think her book January Children in itself was like the most shocking thing for me, because I think that was like the first book where I fully saw myself in it. Like, she is an East African first generation woman, and the book, not many people know this, but for a lot of refugees / immigrants in the mid 1950s, a lot of them didn't have birthdays. Like, birthdays is not a component that we traditionally like take note of. And so when a lot of the refugees and immigrants who came to America, a lot of the birthdays were just automatically January 1st. And so she made her book January Children. And in itself was just, I just saw myself, and like that was like the first time I fully saw myself in it. And just how she got words, how she worded certain things was just so beautiful in images. Anyways, yeah, I think there's just a lot of poets out there who tell their stories, and I think being able to, for me in the generation, see myself in poetry is such a beautiful thing that I do not take for granted in itself. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I love all those poets.
Me
Dinez
too. Morgan
recently went.
Parker.
Oh my God, Morgan Parker. I'm
Women
obsessed
Parker,
with.
the book, There's Better Things Than Beyonce, something.
Yeah, the more beautiful things
Yeah.
than Beyonce. There are more
The
beautiful things
World
than
of
Beyonce. I'll have
yeah.
it like right up here somewhere. Yeah.
I remember the first time
I actually do like so every year at Notre Dame, I do like a guest lecture in their pop culture and gender studies class, and I talk about Beyonce, and I bring that book in to talk about it.
I know.
And
It's
people are like,
everywhere.
"What's happening? Why are we talking about like poetry and Beyonce?" And I'm like, because Beyonce is poetry.
I think
And
that's actually a great book to get people who aren't poetry readers to read poetry. I mean, it's a very Morgan is a very accessible writer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's incredible.
Yeah, she's amazing. And yeah, like I was saying, Dinez like went to UMich briefly, and then like one of his best friends, Nate, and
Hey,
I are
Marshall?
Nate Marshall, and I are good friends. So Dinez is like, I mean, he's such a genuine person as well as poet. So he's just, I don't know. I'm so glad that he's like out there doing his Minnesota thing, repping Minnesota almost as hard as Chicago people rep Chicago. Oh my God. Y'all are like wild. I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, I'm not from the middle. I will mention that y'all mentioned 2 Arkansas poets, Frank Stanford and Maya Angelou are both from Arkansas. So Southern poets do our thing too. Do y'all want to read a little bit from 1 or 2 of these poets?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Whoever's willing to go first.
I have 2 different ones, but anyone can go.
Can I read from a different poet?
Yeah.
I came across this poem this week, and I had never read it before, but I really thought it was really beautiful. It's by Suzi Kim, and it's called Occupation. So I can read it now.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Occupation. The soldiers are hard at work, building a house. They hammer bodies into the earth like nails. They paint the walls with blood. Inside, the doors are locked, shut like eyes of stone, and the stairs are icy. All flights go down. There's no floor, only a roof, where ash is falling, dark snow, a human snow, thickly, blackly falling. Come, they say, this house will last forever. You shall occupy it. You and you. Come, they say, there's room for everyone. And I think this poem is really good at saying a lot of things without saying them, about what's it about and the themes it's trying to talk about. And I don't know, I found it, I always remember, there's again me reading through these issues, and I was like, this poem is really very, very, it stood out to me.
Thank you for sharing that poem.
That was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mona, do you want to share a poem?
Yes. So the reason why I love this book collection by Dante is because it covers grief, and I think for me, grief has just been a topic that I just really haven't fully able to grasp in my life, and I've just always been able to come back to this book, and especially now during what's been going on in Minnesota and George Floyd and just the Black Lives Matter movement, I've been coming back to this book a lot. And there's this one poem called "What the Dead Know" by Hearts that really touches perfectly, I think, on what I've been feeling. Lately, when asked, "How are you?" I respond with a name no longer living. Rakia, Zamar, Sandra, Philando. I am alive by luck at this point. I wonder often if the gun that will unmake me is yet made. What white birth will bury me? How many bullets, like a flock of blue jays, will come carry my black to its final bed? Which photo will be used to water down my blood? Today, I did not die, and there is no God or law to thank. The bullet missed my head and landed in another. Today, I passed a mirror and did not see a body. Instead, a suggestion, a debate, a blank post-it note, they're looking back. I haven't enough room to both rage and weep. I go to cry, and each tear turns to steam. I say I matter, and a ghost, white hand appears over my mouth. And that's that poem. And there's this other beautiful poem called New Country, after Sophia. And yeah, let's go through it. I pledge allegiance to my mother's garden and leftover greens, and dowry seasonings, salt and cast iron skillets hung like new rusting crucifix beside the stove. I pledge of allegiance to Solange and coconut oil. I pledge allegiance to Grinder and my nudes sent like shiny brown flags. I pledge allegiance to the inside joke and Black Twitter, to Shelby Avenue, the side eye emoji, free open mics, and to laughter breaking like bread. Yeah, I'm salty. That's what happens when you're dragged across an ocean and you're curved by a country that soaked its feet in your blood. I pledge of allegiance to no bullets or ballad, no they or bald bird or well-intended white women offering hugs. I choose the cipher at dusk, the swaying circle and the music we make with our mouths, our good mouths, and the ghosts that sometimes crawl out. I choose Sunday candy chorus, our humming bodies and the street lamp flickering on, beats, this impromptu preamble, worn by our own resilience. I choose the bus stop and the soft of dead leaves. November's falling sun, good soft light stretching our dancing shadows, tossing us into the night's cool air. And that's that poem.
That was amazing.
Those are great. I've read the first one, but it was really nice to hear it out loud. I never heard it out loud before.
I never heard of it at all.
So sonically beautiful. I was really excited for this. One of my friends, Keenan Teddy Smith, he actually, he's a poet too, but today we published something in the MQR, which is one of my jobs, the Michigan Quarterly Review, where he talked about Solange and civilization and world building. So it was so cool because it was just like talking about being Black and trying to also like what it looks like to build a world around yourself, and also what the limits of that are too. So it was really cool that like I feel like these moments came together for me tonight. So that was awesome. Angelica, do you want to sell?
Okay, I brought two. I brought Shira Ehrlichman published Odes to Lithium this year, and I was working with Shira over it was 3-4 years ago when she was working on these poems. In her apartment, we used to have a little workshop, 5 people that showed up on Sundays. And I remember hearing these poems like in their manifestation back in the day. And it's so cool to read them now. But there is one in particular that this book in general is so important to me. It's called Odes to Lithium. Shira Ehrlichman lives with bipolar disorder, as do I. And I step away from poetry sometimes. I ignore it because that's the way I ignore my problems. When I'm ignoring myself, I'm ignoring writing. I'm ignoring reading. And I was hospitalized last year. And when I got out of the hospital, the first thing I did was come home and watch a video of Shira reading this poem. And this book in general, I think what poetry can do. She wrote a whole book about a pill, about something so clinical, and wrote odes to it. And it just, it's really hard, especially with mental illness, to take your medication, to put an importance on that. And I don't know, it's been really, really important in my life. And this was the poem that I listened to. This poem's about mania, and I've never heard it explained this way, and it's really hard for me to explain what that feels like, and this poem really does that for me. That's why it's really important to me. And it's called Perfect, and it starts with a quote by K. Redfield Jameson, who wrote An Unquiet Mind. She was a psychologist who dealt with her own bipolar disorder. So perfect. I needed to do something with my moods. It quickly came down to a choice between seeing a psychiatrist or buying a horse. And since I had an absolute belief that I should be able to handle my own problems, I naturally bought a horse. K. Redfield Jameson, An Unquiet Mind. I didn't seek the horse, didn't put out an advertisement. They say it can smell you from 60 miles away, which means if I'm in Toledo and the horse ain't, she can smell black tea and more than a dollop of shame. The way that one famous octopus could predict the winner of a World Cup by putting a particular ball in a particular basket, that's how much my horse loves me. 9 out of 10 times. And by love, I mean nearly destroys me for the sake of her own past. She's yellow-eyed and insolent, my perfect. I didn't name her, she came that way. Her coat is Van Gogh's Starry Night, oil on canvas, post-impressionistic, you know, the one because you've seen it on a tote bag. What most don't know is it depicts the view from the east-facing window of his asylum room. What most don't know is he added an idealized village. Only the villagers know why. Perfect is the kind of bitch horse that reminds you Starry Night's moon is not astronomically correct. I ride until she's raw and the moon chips a nail in the dark. I ride until my breath ties 0-0. Paul, that was the name of the octopus. May we all deserve such simplicity and too many hands. On Wikipedia, you can find Paul's entire life story from his egg hatching in England to present day affairs. But find me manic and you can't find me. I'm a novelist door. I cook meals for the dead and they eat. I ride the casket like a car, step into traffic like a car, but I'm a body. No body can look both ways simultaneously except me. I'm an 18-layer lust cake. I prefer perfect to my own mother, begging. I prefer perfect's confetti plague, raining and raining. I ride until her jaw breaks off. It's a type of singing. Fire follows me around like a pet sister. I should be able to handle my own problems is something my mouth once said to my brain. If my funeral hatches soon, you can bet it will be well attended by horses, muscular, mud slick, expert teeth sluts, fucking, exquisite, and murderous. Perfect is a terrorist disguised as a horse. I prefer choosing terror to a terror I didn't choose.
Damn.
Wow.
Like one of my favorite poets. And then this one's a lot shorter, but Jeremy Radin is a friend of Shira's who actually wrote this poem in a workshop with her, which I think is cool that they kind of tie together. But I wanted to read this next poem just because it kind of reminds me of this community.
Yes.
Whenever I used to go to kirtans when I lived in Brooklyn, and I remember reading this poem to that community. Whenever I'm in a group of people that come together like that, I always think of this poem. So, do you mind if I read another one?
No, go for it, girl.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's called The Inn of the Purple Bison. Hello, traveler. Welcome to the Inn of the Purple Bison. The bread is just now rising in the oven. The tapers are lit. They smell of nutmeg and orange peel. The stew on the stove has been cooking all day long. There is a man on the porch who plays a piano. We don't know where he came from. He brought the piano. We've all brought such heavy things to this place. We have all come here to rest from the carry. The chairs in the lobby are built from yarn. Hot chocolate moves through canals in the floor. The mattresses stuffed with the softest fog. A bloodhound sleeps by every fireplace. Their dreams projected onto the bedroom walls. The blessing fields, the sky full of rabbits. Look how the road has etched your face. Spit its body into your hair. We have found the blue petal that works like water. Come and lie in the cleansing lather. What you have done out there is not our concern. All that you have tangled and cut, all that you have turned against, all the wars you have made and loved, all the wounds you have nursed and fed, all that you have too easily killed, all that you could not help but kill. Start fresh. Start here. Welcome to the Inn of the Purple Bison. We know what the night has done to you.
Wow, that's
Love that
fantastic.
poem. I love that.
I love that they're in conversation. I'm going to read a couple of poems from some people that I love, and like I said, my office is a mess, and I have trouble finding books right now. So I decided to pull some books that I knew where they were because they are like some of the people that are most important to me in the whole world. One is my mentor, Carmen Jimenez Smith. This book was just shortlisted for an NBA, blah, blah, blah. It's an amazing book. She's an amazing poet. She's the first poet I ever knew who was also Peruvian American. Well, that's a lot going on right now. Who's also Peruvian American, and also, yeah. So she's the publisher of Noemi, which is where I also work as the executive editor. So she's been my mentor through poetry, through publishing, through queerness. You know, like she's just been like a fantastic poetry mama to me, and I just think that everything about her is fantastic. And I'm going to read just kind of a random poem from her, from the book, because I just want to pick a poem because I love the whole book. So the name of the poem is Self as Deep as Coma. When I was a girl, I thought clouds were God, and that we dialogued about sin, which mirrored my desires. When our talks made me paranoid, I counted the letters in each word I heard, turned them backward, or rearranged them alphabetically to dodge the buzz of my head. Other times, I was the satyr side of the coin, and the air around me felt like jewels. Then a Bess, pulling the hair from my head in a type of catatonia. My family thought I should lift myself with mind, lift myself from the bed, from the couch, as if the body were the mind's queen. We've seen the world, my family would tell me. In the world, suffering is hunger, war, disease, they said. And because those calamities were terrible, I was ashamed for the insignificance of mine. What I had made, they said, and I should cast it off like a snake molting skin. So I would try each of my atoms a ton, which led to a thought experiment at 11, death by pills. I survived, woozy but alive. No scar left, no redemption or courage, just shame so dark my ancestors called from the fathoms to ask why I sought out their shadows. To end the conversation, tell a story of suicide with a girl in it. She's a ghost desperate for absolution. When I was a girl, I wilted or blew. I burrowed into pain. When I was a girl, I thought my storm would suck me into its eye and uncoil me from what I was. When I was a girl, I worried about who knew I knew, who I would hurt, so I hid myself. We are storms and bargains with heaven, pulses of electricity moving with infinite networks, so much fallibility. What do we bear that comes just from the world? And then what comes from inside us? We bear everything, each part. I loved the part when the world was my torrid lover, seduced by the blue blaze beaming from my body. My eye helped me plow through the living room like a comet. I could burn down or out or air, and I could be such a good poet in it sometimes. I liked how brilliant the light words emanated, stars I arranged in the sky like a god who would fall to the earth, having made something beautiful and vainglorious. Sometimes those were the days, the ones I could hold still enough to arrange stars without the burn. But I cannot. I have in me a buried spark. I buried it myself. When I was a girl, I collected reams of paper, smoothed by the white over and over, the hope of starting from blank. I hoped to endure being well enough to conjure a new bright vessel because I wanted to live.
I love
Um,
that.
Yeah. So yeah, she's also like my poetry mentor when it comes to depression, which I shockingly learned a lot about. And then I was going to read a poem, but I want to read a different one, which I highly encourage people to do. Always do the poem that you feel instead of the poem that you plan.
Yes.
And it's by one of my best friends in the world. Let's see. I'm gonna look it up online. Here's his book, but it's not in his book. It's a newer poem. So this is his book, and it's called "Trouble the Water" by Derek Austin. He is, like I said, one of my favorite people in the world. He really writes a lot about Blackness, queerness, and he also uses like a holiness to write about them that I find beautiful. His aesthetics are totally Baroque, and yeah, he's one of my favorite people ever. He has lifted me through many a dark hour. So a poem I'm going to read by him is called "Taking My Father and Brother to the Frick." And if you're unfamiliar with the Frick, it's a museum and is also very Baroque. So it's one of his favorite places. Disembark, the Turners seem to say, the starburst barges glowing in the dust. But I can't read old Rembrandt, his guarded eyes like jewels, like black men. Even the lone marble busts of kings and soldiers fail to arrest you. It's nearly closing time. The elderly linger, rapt. Who has looked at either of you lately with such tenderness? Entering the narrow hall, I ignore my favorite portraits, their ruffles and bodices, carnations and powder puffs, afraid to share my joy with you. Yet your bearing in this space, the precisions of your shoulder, the crowns of your head, make them sing anew. You are both good men. Walk into the Fragnord room. You both seem bored still. It's fine. Perhaps we can progress like these panels, slowly and without words. Here, the city where I first knew men in the dark, in this gold and feminine room.
Whoa, that was so beautiful.
Wow.
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed
Yeah,
that.
thank you. Derek is like
Incredible.
one of the best poets I know. Absolutely, people should buy his book, or I can send you his book because, like I said, I found like 80 copies of it, and also I like to send people books. But
Same.
I will definitely be putting links to some of these poems on Twitter later so that people can check them out. And I want to thank you for sharing those. Somebody might have some original poetry to share with us. Maybe all of you.
So I do, but I gotta get my computer charger because my computer's about to run out of battery. So I'll be right back.
Thank you for being prepared. I was doing really well at teaching him. I'm going to stop. Let's wait for Charlie to come back because I know he'll be mad if we start talking, if we start sharing poetry without hearing it.
Well, so the thing is, I had the charger. It was just on the other side of the room because I didn't want to be in bed. So I was sort of.
We appreciate that, Charlie. Thank you. We appreciate that.
No worries.
You were trying, but that's okay. Muna, why don't you start for us?
I had a plan originally, but now I'm like trying to feel if that's the poem I want to read for this.
Yeah, girl, feel it out. Angelica, do you want to get started while she's trying to decide?
I can. Yeah, I'm gonna. So if we do another one of these, maybe I'll share something more current. But right now, I'm just not ready.
That's fine.
So I'm gonna go right in the middle. I used to write all my like long form slam poems, and then I kind of had these middle years, and then now I have what I have now. So we're going to the middle years. Those are the ones I feel the best about right now. And I wrote a poem. I'm just gonna read it from memory. I memorize everything because I do come from that slam world. So
Nice.
I always have all of them in my head. So we'll see how that works out. But this is called "When the Horse Becomes the Rider." And it's one of my favorite poems I've written. I wrote it about a year before I actually left New York City, which is relevant when you hear the poem. Okay. When the horse becomes the rider. Sometimes I curse the rooftop for mocking me, for only showing me one monotonous city, for being so high. For the pipe dream of my own wingspan, I have to siphon back down through the building and onto the ground just to get anywhere. Sometimes I skip the middleman and get right to cursing this city no one can afford, all the while reaching for nothing in particular, reaching for whatever somebody else wants. I invite strangers inside in hopes they will envy my things. The value of anything increases when someone else wants it. Sometimes I curse the winter because in the cold I build nests and don't take out the trash and steep for months in piles of garbage and luxuries and food that I ate and clothes that don't fit and plus size lingerie I've never needed. Sometimes I curse my body and the way everyone looks at it and the way it looks at everyone and the hands that don't touch it and the way it can feel so large on a crowded bus but so small alone on a mattress. One day, I'll climb these stairs without getting winded and be able to sit still without clawing a cigarette and see the clouds far beyond the smog and run back down the stairs, plant my feet in the ground and carry myself on my own back all the way out of here.
That was beautiful.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Do you have a second poem? Or
I could do one more in from my head if you wanted.
I would love a second poem.
It's been like the same
I'm
period
not
of time.
just like selfish. I'm greedy. I want more.
Well, exactly.
I like self-published my own little chat book during this time. It's probably around 2015. The crazy part about this, I had a full-length show. That was like the height for me, right? I felt like I was really going places. I was supposed to film a music video, and the next day we did a musical collab with this next poem I'm about to read. With a song it was based, it's titled after a Glenn Hansard song. Two of my friends performed the song. We had this whole compilation, like we completely put it together. And that night, after I did that full-length show, my family drove 3 hours from Philly to come see it. My boss, I was a nanny. My boss has got a different babysitter so they could come to my show. Like literally everyone in my life ended up in this one room where I had a band behind me and I had like, we called it Angelica, Lacey and the Ange Band. And it was just an exciting time in my life, right? So after I got done the show, we were all supposed to meet at a bar down the street. And my friend Phil lived around the corner. So I said, Phil, can I go up to your roof real quick and smoke a joint before I go to the bar and meet everybody? He's like, yeah, go ahead. So I go up there with a friend and I'm holding flowers people gave me and all the books I just made and stapled together and I was giving out. And as I walked off that rooftop through the big metal door that you got to the roof, the door slammed back onto the back of my leg and ruptured my Achilles tendon. Sliced my Achilles tendon fully. Fire department had to come carry me off the roof. So the music video, all these things, they never happened. I ended up having to spend the summer in Bumblefuck, Missouri at the lake with my parents because I lived on a 4th floor walk up that I couldn't get to. So this one's like a really waited for me because that never happened. It never ended up happening. I always hear the song when I read it, but I never got to put I don't know. Anyway, that's the backstory, but it's called High Hope. When you made for the mountains like a millennial beatnik with a slingshot in your heart, a couple of bucks in your pocket, and a car with a stutter start, I didn't weep. On a dirt road and a windblown skirt, I knew better than to align myself with your rear view. When your tires spat up dirt that stuck in my teeth, I didn't brush them for weeks. If the devil is in the dustpan and the details, they're in the broom, and each imperfect grain of me has been twisted into bristles, you go. I'll clean up soon. I'll untangle from my torn waistbands and frayed seams each moment. You've made me feel seen. And maybe while you're climbing through coastlines and chasing your own wings, I'll be digging up fistfuls of my wonder and fashioning an altar not unlike a billboard illustrating each tree that has grown tall inside my gut and how all this height, it's changed me. I'll hang myself so high on the horizon that you're going to have no choice but to drive straight on into me. See, I know you're bright. It stings like a high beam, and I know there is no such thing as a well-lit goodbye, so I know I'll be seeing you when the floors are swept, when you finally decide to throw it in park, when my teeth are clean.
Wow.
Wow, it was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Angelica.
sharing about that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Angelica.
Notepad.
And also, I can't say how much I admire slam poets. Like, I'm not a great speaker. I'm
To
not
me,
an
those
amazing
weren't like my
reader.
slam poets. Those were like page poems for me, but I can't help but perform them from
Right.
how I've come from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, like, the memorization.
What I learned from
that's never
studying
gonna be
classics,
missed.
like studying Latin and ancient Greek for 5 years, I really did learn that all poetry is oral tradition. It all comes from a place of oral tradition. Everything works out loud if it's read by the right person. You know what I mean? I don't know. That was a big realization for me.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think it's always interesting to see how our other interests like slide into what
Yeah.
we're writing about.
Totally.
Muna, are you ready to share with us?
Yes, I am. I'm still feeling Angelica's pieces, but okay,
They will watch over us for a long time.
right. So honestly, Angelica, I'm kind of different. Where one of my insecurities is fear of forgetting and on stage and like just being blank. Like that's one of my biggest fears. So I'm still in a place where like my pieces are memorized, but I still have it with me just because I just don't want to risk that. But I'm slowly transitioning to fully memorize, no paper, no nothing. But this poem is actually a recent poem I wrote. And so I do this thing whenever I perform. And another part of why I love performative poetry is the sense of community and the sense of like just interactive. You feel the space, you feel the room holding you. And so I always love, like I started this right when I started performing, where I always do recite, no, what's it called? Call and response. Yeah, that's what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Where it really just grounds me. So I want to see if y'all want to do it with me this time. And so repeat after me. I am alive.
I am alive.
Therefore, this space.
Therefore, this space.
It's alive.
It's alive.
I am alive.
I'm alive.
Therefore, this space.
Therefore, this
space
is alive.
Is alive.
Black culture stands up.
I'm not. Okay. Well, this was a nice event.
That was a good question. I should have clarified. Okay, I'm starting.
I couldn't see y'all. Okay, so we got weird.
I love this. I loved it. Okay. All right, I'm gonna start.
I love that. This is like my profession, and there are still Suzi screw ups. Charlie, you're not allowed to laugh.
This one's called "If Black Culture Wore America." Black people, stand up. Black culture starts to speak in America. Get shut down before speaking. Stop speaking. Stop speaking. Be American. Take off your culture. Be American. Be American. You can't take blackness off, but there is cream for that. Wait, why are you so light? Does that still make you a black girl? Be that black girl. Not that cultured or hood girl, but that good girl. Keep the good parts. I mean, like a little culture, so I can say I have that one black friend, so I can say I have that one friend. Show us your talents. Can you show us how you do your dances? I mean, like, those black dances. I mean, like, shouldn't you know them? I mean, like, aren't you a party animal? I mean, like, aren't you an animal at the zoo? I mean, like, life of the party. I mean, like, a nigga African American. I mean, like, doesn't that make your bloodline African? So dance for me, dance for me. Let us use you. Let us use you. Let us use you. See, that's a compliment. Get out of your head. Speak up. Speak up. Why are you not speaking up? Why are you speaking? Do not speak. Do not speak. Don't you listen? Don't you listen? Don't you listen? Black culture remains standing. Gets treated well in front of the camera to claim diversity. They get slapped in the face and silenced when it gets turned off. Gets told it's for your own good. Gets told, show me a talent or show me an institution. It's your fault for speaking. Were you not paying attention? Wait, what are you wearing? Wow, I love how exotic it is. What are you wearing? That's not appropriate for the setting. Dress right, dress neutral, match your clothing, match your clothing, match your clothing. Wait, why don't you ever wear your culture clothing? Do you even know your culture? I'm just wondering. Why do your people wear such bright colors? Why do your people do your hair that way in cornrows? Why would you get that? Why would you get that? Did you see Megan's box sprays? Where do you think I can get that? Where do you think I can get that? Where do you think I can get that? Look, it isn't complicated. Get rid of the good parts. Keep the good parts. Get rid of the bad parts. Your blackness is the bad part. Your culture is the good part. Just let us use you. Let us use you. Let us use you. Black culture remains standing. Black culture shuts its door. Black culture understands this is not a white privilege poem. This is a Black culture poem, not giving their privilege another platform to believe our culture, our arts cares about the opinion. We are loud. We are bright. Our culture is everlasting. Our culture is bright and loud, yet Black culture says one thing and one thing only. You need Black culture to justify your identity. Black culture needs no one. That's that poem.
That was amazing. Thank you so much.
That was so dope.
In the slam world, we snap.
Speaking about, I was probably laughing so hard at the intro. The way he
Yeah, that was so.
and like had those like
Y'all do y'all new shit.
Yeah.
That's what I always think of when I think of slam. Y'all new shit.
Mm-hmm. But the reason why I love slam poetry so much is because, you know, your voice can really dictate what certain words mean. And what I mean by that is you can say one thing on the page and people are like, oh, I swear it means this. I swear it means this. But when you say it out loud, it can mean a totally different component. And I think voice just has a power that I just really, really love.
Wow. Yeah, I agree. I think that there's something about the way that a voice can change a poem that, like, I think that you have to be willing to just experience it a little bit more when it's sonic like that, when it's vocal, and maybe not always worry about what each word says, but also listen to the meaning behind the words a lot more than when you're reading a poem.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Lena, for sharing those. Charlie, will you share a couple with us?
Yeah, definitely. I've never read a poem before that I've written ever. So
That's exciting. New shit.
I'm losing my poetry virginity. But you know, so I'm very nervous, but we're gonna rock
We're
with
so
it.
glad it's with you, with us.
Okay, great. All right, so this poem I wrote. I feel like maybe just because I'm getting into it, I'm trying to write poems. Just like I try and like pick a thing. I'm writing a poem about this, you know, like, and then that might sound simple, but I mean, like, even just like a moment or a feeling or like a picture or something I can't quite explain, like with my words, because sometimes I feel like I can work through that with poetry. So this poem is about, when you think about like these distant memories that you had when you were a kid and like trying to access them. And it's called, I don't know what I'm calling it yet, but I'm calling it Waterfront for right now. There is rust in the metal of his boots, and his spurs cackle along the glass as his eyes lay into yours, with force that you've only felt in the pernicious nature of our long old jaunts. Those moments that we don't talk about before the sandpipers plucked all the bugs out of all the mud holes of the beach. As I watch you, the water clutches onto a single pearl, and the only light in the world dangles so far away from me over the many certain waves that I will never see. There's a moment in the fold of your jacket. It recalls me to an echo that bounces off a wall in a dirty public washroom that is not a pistol shot away from my stakeout, where we first laid with one another and held on to each other. And we finally decide to think of it. The bird calls and the dog with the pus blots. We could have gone into town more often than we did, even though it was quite a walk from both of our houses. I wish we had. That's the poem. So there you go.
You did amazing. Do you have one or two poems for us?
I have another one. This is the one this other poem is the poem. Well, I'll just tell the story. Like, this is why I got really validated by this poem, because I was taking this poetry class and I came in and my poem that I had submitted for homework, which is this poem with some edits, was just on the board, like not attributed to an author. And for like 35 minutes, like my teacher just made the class like comment on the poem, and he never said it was my poem or anything. He just made the class talk about it, and he never brought it up to me either. But he, like, at the end, he was like, I just want to see what people thought about this poem. So that was really validating too, because he didn't even talk to me about it personally, that poem, but it made me feel like, wow, like, okay, like I feel like I'm like doing something different than what else is going on in class. Anyway, this poem is about like I grew up in New York City, and I was trying to like put myself in the shoes of some of the people that lived in the town where I went to college in, who like how they thought of city kids, because in some ways it seemed like they envied people from New York and they wanted to go to a city like New York or LA or Austin or Minneapolis, a city like their town was so small, but in other ways they really didn't fuck with us. So it was kind of a two thing. So this poem is called Centralia. You can hear, even in the most quaint towns, the mailboxes slammed by some baseball bats. Postage falls, the best of worst of sounds, far worse than the city's vague, mean chit-chats. The quiet is rich, but if you listen closely, a slam of the door after the first cold day, when the mayor says the pool is now closed and a teacher tells one ambitious girl you might just be bright enough to make it out, just as grandfather forgets mother's names, and the shattering of the one beer the kids stole, brakes screeching after an attempted joyride, the clink of the toe crank taking his sob, a boy's television set buzzes. Meat hooks hang off the water tower. They dig through each side of my collarbone, dangling over makeout point, and I listen. I notice homes start to finally come to rest in silence. Similarity, appreciation. That's fun.
I love it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you opening yourself up a little bit and sharing your poetry with us for like the first time. That's very
That's
cool.
so exciting.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the first time I went on stage at the Bowery Poetry Club in New York. I read this like 6-minute long poem called Every Day about my best friend, and it was it had like this repeating line that went, I see you every day, you're hippie, I don't give a fuck, peace and love, moccasin boots, shirtless, bongo playing self, every day. And I went on 6 minutes long, right? And I got off stage, and this kid came up to me. I was outside smoking a cigarette, and this like young kid came up to me, and he went, that was epic. Like Napoleon.
Whoa.
He goes,
That's
like
so
Napoleon
sick.
Dynamite on acid. and then walked away. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to read a poem again.
That is
But
an
I'll
extreme
literally never
reaction.
forget it.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's an awesome first reaction.
First compliment I forgot.
That is a very
Like
memorable
Napoleon Dynamite
awesome.
on acid.
on acid. Yeah.
I for my first book, man. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Write that down and put it out there. Acknowledgements. That's got to go in the acknowledgements
Yeah,
at the lead,
absolutely.
right? Thank you to that random kid who once called me.
Yes.
So I guess I'll read a couple of poems too.
Yes.
I am.
Yes.
Can I grab a beer out of the fridge? It'll take me 10 seconds. It's my fridge is right there.
Yeah. No.
Sorry, I
Unacceptable.
had my headphones in.
This is Suzi. This is Maud. This is Suzi Maud, and we have Angelica. Have you voted yet, Angelica? You can't believe.
For what?
Yeah.
What am I voting for?
No, I was just making a joke that I was being the mod.
Okay.
And
You let me go to the fridge.
I let you go to the fridge, but only if you've already voted. So I was gonna read like this poem that I published recently, but instead I'm gonna read this like long ass poem that hasn't been published because like I can.
Okay. You
I
should.
love it.
Yes.
So it's called On the Bus Ride from Arkansas to Michigan, The Window Frames Me. And it's after Chantal Ackerman. If y'all don't know Chantal Ackerman, she's an amazing woman director. She died a couple of years ago. Also, it takes me a really long time to write poems because I go through a lot of different edits and stuff and revisions. And so I wrote this and then she died like a couple of like weeks later. And I felt like I caused it a little bit, but I obviously did. But anyway, this is the latest version of it. On the bus ride from Arkansas to Michigan, the window frames me. 1. Sugar straight from the bag buries me from the inside out. Tonight I travel, a Selena Gomez sad song on repeat. I float on Arkansas cotton fields where a lightness brings me down under the cold moon I call mother. 2. I create static hands through hair. I create electricity. 3. Day dawns and my mouth has grown over like a scar across, raw, red, and unsightly. But I broke all my mirrors before I left home anyway. 4. Marble crumbles. I'd rather be kept in bones, mutating. 5. I see a kitchen table in every tree and a lighthouse in every musical wrist. 6. A stranger on the bus told me to smile, and my friend texted, "Well, you do cry too much." Out the window, the moon teaches me patience, waits her turn. My death would not complete anything, but maybe it could be a beginning. I count out centuries until the next stop. 7. I take off my coat and stand outside to wait my transfer. I seek a numbness that matches me, form and content. My fingers tingle only for a moment before losing all feeling. Remind me pain is part of the journey to relief. 8. I make momentary goals. Tomorrow, wake up somewhere new. Keep my grocery list when I'm gone. They feel very physical to me. I lose my socks. I lose my voice. 9. We pass into cornfields, and I think that when I die, I want to be wrapped in raw cotton and itch the last thing keeping my spirit here until my skin is gone. 10. There is a disconnect between myself and my siblings. We come in contact only in accidental spaces. We have lost our blood. We are no longer bound. I wonder, when will this become irreversible? I text them, they bristle, and there is a trickle-down disgust. None of us want to be where we're from, and if that is the one thing we have in common anymore. They ignore my calls as I ignore those of my parents. We make no families. We just make tribes. 11. I arrive home, but I cannot sleep. Instead, I turn to the field behind my apartment, drink out a childhood game. I point to the moon, then swing the bat. The wood vibrates against my palms. The world swerves with the rotation of my torso, but my foot will not plant. 12. When I return to bed, I dream that there are 2 cats on my bed. And when I get up for water, they follow, bite, chase, soft paw my ankles until I give up, sit cross-legged on the floor. I never get that glass of water. And when I wake, there's only 1 cat, and he's lonely, just like me. Together, we live tweet a Fast and Furious marathon. Like always, I stop before we get to the one where Paul Walker died. My mentor tells me healing is not a static condition. Mamita, you are an independent state. But I buffer. Last night, I broke open, yellow and runny.
Oh,
That's one poem. And then this is a poem from the chapbook that will be out in September, and it's called Dear Dorothy. And I was trying to describe it to someone recently, and I was just like, I don't know. It's just like, I'm here, I'm queer. Dorothy Gale from The Wizard of Oz made me that way. So like, that's
Friends of Dorothy.
so that's basically the book. And this is a poem from the book. And it's called Homesick. I see it in my dreams still when I think I've pushed it out of my mind. Winds that billow me a sea the color of the Mississippi, all mud and leaves and a way out. A storm blew, and I am joyful in defiance, standing at my window, my cheeks cut by blowing debris until finally I close my eyes against the dirt that comes at my face. Buried in my own home, I feel the comfort of weight on my chest, warm knowledge that something finally makes sense. I am young in dream, and I don't mind the noise that builds until my ears fill and burst and find the silence I've been seeking for years. But now I've turned my back on the winds, and I'm trying to find a patch on earth instead. I read backwards, search for the right map, the right prayer. Is there only desperate sadness and a loneliness that aches in my joints at night, a throbbing in my finger bones, and in the cold, I can barely clutch the steering wheel. Instead, I sit in a parking lot and sing along with the radio until my voice cracks, fails, follows, falls. I am not just song, but in togetherness we are song. And at church I sing half a duet, and the choir answers in a version of your voice, Dorothy. Religion splinters and splits. Some churches out east have even turned Art Deco, and those are where I wear an Empire waist, drink in the back pews instead, and my holy water is gin, herbs and lime and an extraterrestrial green. Sometimes I think I can be more than martyr. I can let go of this monopoly on sorrow. Then someone hands me the pills outside of a sacred space, and I burn through every emotion I know. I turn up the volume. I drown out in stereo.
Wow.
So they're like very different. From very different books. But those are my poems.
I'm excited to get my copy in the mail. Pre-order that.
Yeah.
It's a lot cheaper than these private minis you've been paying for, so I know you can afford it. People in the chat. So I'll
It's true.
Yo,
It's
that link is
probably
on
less
Twitter.
than the price of a private mini fee. You're
It's less
absolutely
than
right.
I mean, you can get 2 copies for less than a private mini. So I know you have the money. Support my girl Suzi. Buy that. She I don't know if she was gonna say it, but I'll say it. Buy that shit. It's already hard being a poet. Buy that shit. I know you can afford it.
And try to buy
Say
it
less.
somewhere else than Amazon is what I would say. But if Amazon works for you.
No, buy it right off the website. It's mad easy. They have PayPal.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say.
Buy it for yourself, buy it for a friend, buy it for a family member. You have people, give it to the people. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, you can buy it, but you don't have to.
I'm gonna go on a rant about independent bookstores soon, so let's keep moving.
Is it cool if I share
Go
one
ahead.
more?
Yeah.
Is it cool if I share one more?
This is something.
Please.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
My name is Muna. They say my name means desire in Arabic. They say my mother wanted to name me Samaya, but it could not fit into the tongue of her new home. I am a strong believer of mango smoothies. I know every lyric and every line to The Lion King. I have watched it almost 500 times. Watch it as if it's my first every time. I am not fluent in Somali, but fluent in diaspora. I am the air. I am too American to be Somali and too Somali to be American. buried in one, born in the other. I am not land. I am air, existing everywhere, invisible everywhere. I have an accent in every language, in every country, in every land, but the one my body has yet to me, I am air. Too black to be a woman, not man enough to be black, too black to be Muslim, born in one, still born in the other. I'm a eulogy written as a gift from my own birth. Every day I stand and speak the Pledge of Allegiance. Every day I stand to speak my own eulogy. I am taught to be feared by the dominant group, but also taught to be feared by other minority groups who do not hold my other form of identities. And isn't that already a poem within itself? To be a piece of everyone is to be a whole of no one. I am diaspora, fluence in desire. I have an accent in every mango smoothie. Every day I stand to speak the pledge of Lion King. Every day I stand and I'm speaking my own intersectionalities. And isn't that already a poem within itself? That's the poem.
I love that. That was amazing. Also, mango over everything.
Mango over everything.
The end.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know anything that I like wouldn't be improved if it were mango. Like, I'm just like mango at like.
My
what's
mom
the-
always used to eat
So
mangoes
good.
over the sink. That's like I have like one of my biggest memories of childhood is my mom would stand over the sink and eat a mango so that all the juices would go down right into the sink. And I picture that every time I think of a mango, I picture my mom over a sink.
Yeah, one of my first poems was about it was about eating a mango. Like
love
I
that.
don't know where it is, but yeah, mangoes are like it, and they are also like such a I don't know. They are such a diaspora pinpoint too. Like they're beautiful fruit, and they're also the most amazing thing in the world. Period.
Mhm.
Well, I know we wanted to keep this one short, and in the future, once we have some ideas of like interviews we might do and talkings we might do, but I just wanted to kind of share poetry tonight. I'm so glad that everyone made it. I don't know if this will be our permanent time now that we're going to have a lot more private minis at this time. So we'd rather like let the community like kind of so we might change times a little bit, but it will we're gonna work it out amongst ourselves. We'll figure it out. But yeah, thank you to everyone who was watching. Do we have any final words or promos for anyone?
I have no promos, but I think one thing that just I would have never got into poetry if it weren't for like so people like when you go on a trip, right? They're like, bring a book. And I always brought these fiction books and I would go and I would sit there and I would read like the first 3 chapters. And it wouldn't be bad or good, like not on the quality of the book, but like that's one thing I love poetry. Like if I bring like I have like next to me all these books of poetry and it's like it's so perfect for digesting your time, like just the kind of person I am and how like anal I am with my time. Like it's like I can stop reading and begin reading a lot more at my own will at good stopping points with poetry because obviously unless you're reading like epics which are great and do exist like they don't even the long ones don't last that long so you know like when you're digesting it I think it's really really accessible at least for me and like how I like to read so as much as I like fiction in some ways like bring a poetry book on your next trip and you might like it more than you think.
Yeah, you can also just like find a website like Charlie was saying earlier and kind of mess around and find poems. If there's something you love, there's a poem about it. Like literally. I was talking to somebody recently and they're like talking about Green Lantern and I was like, oh yeah, I know a really good poem about Green Lantern.
Exactly.
Like, you want me to send it to you? And they were like, no, what's happening right now? And I was like, that's cool. I'm gonna send it to you. Because if you give a poet like a subject, we will find a poem about it. Or if there's one, we'll write one. So, yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say like there are if anyone's watching and they like don't know where to start, they want to unlock like just being more creative, especially during quarantine right now. There are so many workshops you can be a part of. If you want to be like pointed toward any, like I know of a lot right now, and also I have a favorite Instagram account that shares the books he's reading every day. He reads every day. It's Jeremy Radin who wrote The End of the Purple Bison that I read earlier. His Instagram at Jeremy, Germy, like Jeremy Radin, is a great place to find poems because he's sharing them every day. And there's tons of resources out there. So if anyone has questions about that, reach out to any of us because I think we all could point you in all different directions.
Yeah, I love talking about poetry.
I love it. Yes.
I love it. So like anybody who is ever like, I don't know what I like, I'm like, cool, I will send you a packet and
we'll find you something. Yeah.
We will
One
find
year
you.
for Christmas, I gave my mom copies of all my favorite books and I should have given them back because they were my copies. But I put sticky notes of why I liked each poem in the book. Like little blurbs of what they meant to me, and that was my Christmas present to her because she said to me about a month before that, I don't understand, like I don't know how to get it, I don't know how to find this accessible. So I compiled every book that I love the most, wrote out these sticky notes all throughout the books and gave them to her. Like I don't know, that's a great passion of mine. So I'd love to help people find something.
Yeah, I mean, like honestly, I love giving books and sharing books so much that I just really tried to harass Charlie into letting me send a book to JoJo because I think that I know a book that she would like, and literally she and I have never spoken.
I get you. I feel you.
I'm like super trying to do it.
I love the way you brought up.
Everyone's trying to get JoJo. Everyone cares about JoJo. I bring JoJo in,
Hey,
and
Charlie,
I'm liver.
I will send you a book too, Charlie. Now that I know that what you like.
No, there's a couple poets that I think you would like. Like I'm going to be sending you links all night, Charlie. But go ahead.
Totally, please do. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I send you a packet of books, will you give one to JoJo?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, thank you. That's all I want. I just want her to read a book. Muna, do you have any last words for the panel?
Yes, I want to make a comment that Angelica said and like what you said about accessibility. Because for me, I grew up absolutely hating poetry, and it's because I grew up academically in the sense of like Shakespeare and that form of poetry, which of course is good in its own sense. But for me,
I love Shakespeare, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
totally know what you mean.
It just wasn't accessible to me, and so it wasn't until I got into other poets where my stories were accessible in the sense of it was written. I could tell it was written for me, and so I definitely think that there's definitely poetry. There's poets out there. Not only is the poetry good on the subject, whatever, but the wording and the way it's accessible to us. And I think first of all, poetry is changing. It's always changing, and I think as it changes and grooms and whatever it turns into, we all can find a piece of it in ourselves. And I think for me, right now in a world where social media is all about being this perfect sense of like yourself or whatever, I love poetry because that's where I find the realest forms of our humanity. In poetry I see the most human parts of ourselves, and like in this panel in itself, like hearing your all's stories in itself makes me feel closer to y'all because I feel so connected to some of the words. I mean, many of the words that you all said, and now it's part of my story in the sense of how we navigate and into our tomorrows and etc. So I just want to say thank you for having me, Suzi. I want to say thank you all for sharing and allowing us to hear your beautiful words and to grasp onto it. So thank you all.
Yeah,
thank you for sharing, Muna.
Yeah. And thank everyone for coming out here. Oh, I think I have your banners. Let's see. Okay, there's the Suzi Screw Up one. I didn't need that. Let's see. Oh, there we go. I was like, this is not right. Okay. Muna, we can follow you here on Twitter. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you tweet about like everything, pretty much.
I tweet now recently. Usually it was just poetry, but now it's poetry and Podquester and other etc. stuff about my life. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, do it. Angelica.
Let me say something.
Yeah, say something.
I didn't use my Twitter until I started playing Podquester, so I mostly tweet about Podquester. But maybe I will start tweeting about poetry more.
Yes.
Yeah, reach out is all I would like to say. Like, let's talk. Let's all keep talking. There's so much more I'd love to share about just my favorite. Well, like, those are 2 poems that scratch the surface. Like, I have a lot of favorite poems. So I just sent Charlie a Buddy Wakefield link, and he better watch
Yes.
it because I think he'll love it.
I will.
Yeah, my whole sleeve is based off of that Buddy Wakefield poem that I sang. So it's very important to me. And when I showed it to him, I went to one of his shows and I showed him his name is in the typewriter keys throughout the sleeve.
Oh,
like his
wow.
name is on my arm, but it's in typewriter keys around. And I showed it to him and he just looked me dead in the eye and went, I hope I don't let you down. And walked away. That's how I feel right now. I hope I don't let you down.
And then Charlie, what
Yeah.
can we find on your very
It used to be different. I would have said very different things like 2 weeks ago, but now my Twitter, I have a responsibility to be a little public facing for my job. So you'll probably see some relatively tame sequester tweets. But I will say this: if you need anything, I don't know why these people would be in the audience, but I always like to say this: if you haven't played sequester and you want to play sequester, reach out to me. If you're trying to get involved in the community, get connected with people, like reach out to me. Like I'm a really open person. I'll do whatever I can to help you get more involved. And in terms of poetry, I don't have a lot for you, but I might, share more now that I've opened that door to myself. So, follow me because I'm nice and I deserve the follow, not because you're expecting any great content.
Okay. This is me. I tweet about poetry and sequester and reality TV and also memes that make me laugh because I don't know. That's what I do. If you want to get in touch with me, I would email me. My email's on my website because honestly, those message requests, I never check those. I get a lot of spam, so I never check those. So I would email me if you want to talk about poetry, but I'm always down to talk about poetry. I'm less down to talk about sequester because honestly, talk to some of these strategy experts instead. That's what they're there for. I mean, we can talk. I don't know what you want to hear. I talk a lot about sequester on here, so I don't know if I have anything new to say. But yeah, so I just want to say again, thank you all for being here, and thanks everyone for watching.